He's about as accurate, that's the old one, she used it. He's about as accurate as they come. A world-famous futurist tells us who he thinks will win the Chicago mayor's race.
There's a new job description for people who advise companies on coming trends. Futurist. They anticipate and prepare for tomorrow to help executives make better decisions today. David Houle is known as the CEO's futurist. He lectures all over the world, writes about coming changes. He was involved in the creation of MTV, Nickelodeon, and CNN Headline News. But now he's really made it because he's here on Fox Chicago News. Always good to have you with us, David.
It's always great to be with you, Bob.
We have a few topics to go over tonight. Let's start with what's happening in California, the legalization of marijuana. And did I read somewhere where you see this coming everywhere?
2 years ago, I said that I thought marijuana would be legalized, or certainly decriminalized nationwide after the 2012 election. And the reasons for that are obvious. I mean, aside from the ambiguities of having guns legal, alcohol legal, tobacco legal, and habit-forming painkillers legal, why not marijuana? But really, it's about the money. It's about the fact that politicians are desperately looking for new revenue streams. So another sin tax. We spend $1 trillion in the war on drugs, and it's a failure. And we spend more money keeping a prisoner incarcerated in a year than we do paying for a kid to go to college.
Now, when you give predictions like this around the world, as you do folks raise their hand and say, you know, where do you get that from? How do you come up with this?
Well, sure. I mean, not with that one in particular, but generally people go, so how do you do this? What's your research? I do a lot of research. I really cast my net widely. I read dozens of periodicals, look broadly, do a lot. I have about 50 incoming email newsletters and research reports every day in my inbox. And it's just a matter of connecting the dots widely. I'm kind of like the superficial grazer, if you will.
You're like one of those websites that aggregate from many different sources.
Call me an aggregator. All right.
Let's talk a little politics.
Sure.
A lot about the Tea Party, and you've been talking about a third party coming soon. What's that all about?
I think by 2014 there'll be a serious third party of the center. I think the Tea Party is right in the anger against these entitled career politicians who seem to serve themselves and not the country. But I think you're probably an independent, I'm probably an independent, we're probably centrist, and I think the Tea Party may ultimately drag the Republicans so far to the right that they'll be the Whig Party by 2020. So I think the question is how it's going to start. But I think there's a strong impetus for a third party that's going to happen over the next 4 years.
As you look to the past to predict the future at times, isn't this, what's going on now in politics, a case of the pendulum swinging, and it tends to swing too far one way and then it adjusts and goes maybe too far the other way, eventually settling in the middle?
Yes, but I think there's an additional ingredient, which is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party seem to be so legacy or 20th century thinking in their thinking, as though the ideas that they have from the last century clearly aren't working. So there needs to be a newness. And I've often said that 1910 to 1920 was the beginning of the 21st century with World War I. I think this decade is when we're going to really create the 21st century.
And big question here in Chicago, who's going to occupy the fifth floor office at City Hall? What do you see in that mayoral election?
As a futurist, I try not to get into the jungle, but given what I've heard around this country, they want politicians who speak straight, accept that there's problems, and tell us how to deal with the problems and be very forthright. I'll say Rahm Emanuel.
Because he fits that type of personality?
I don't think he's trying to cater. I think he's very direct and very honest and blunt, but I think that's what it's called for in this time.
We don't want warm, fuzzy, kinder, gentler?
Nope. Not the people that I hear, and I travel all across the country. They're sick and tired of being pandered to. They really are.
Always interesting to hear what you have to say. Thanks, David.
My pleasure, Bob.
And for more on David Houle and his forecasts, you can go to our website where we've got a link to evolutionshift.com. That's his site, or davidhoule.com. If you go to myfoxchicago.com, you can get it all and find out about, among other things, his terrific newsletter. Robin?